Okay. All right. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Park and Recreation Commission meeting of October 21st, 2021. The time is 6:02, and I'll invite Becky to call the roll.
All right. Commissioner Cabrales, she is absent tonight. Commissioner Emerson also absent. Commissioner Gutierrez.
Here.
Commissioner Lauman.
Here.
Chair Machado.
Here.
Commissioner Reisinger.
Here.
And Commissioner Sandoval.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. I'll invite you, Becky, to explain how the public can participate in this evening's agenda.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Viewers are welcome to provide public comment online through Zoom or by telephone at 669-900-9128. And the meeting ID is 946-0348-5912. If you are watching this meeting through Zoom, please select the participants button and select raise hand if you wish to speak. If you are participating by telephone and wish to speak, please press *9. When it is your turn to speak, you will be notified by the host inviting you to participate. You need to press *6 to unmute yourself. Once you are unmuted, you will have 3 minutes to provide your comments.
Thank you, Becky. Are there any amendments to this evening's agenda? Susan?
There are none.
Okay. Then the first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of September 16th, 2021. Are there any questions or comments in regards to the minutes of last month from anybody? I see a head shaking no, so I'll ask for a motion to approve.
Can move to approve. This is Stacy.
Thank you, Stacy. And a second?
I'll
second.
This is Ariel.
And we got a second, so thank you so much. Becky, can you conduct the roll call, please?
Commissioner Gutierrez,
Yes.
Commissioner Lauman,
Yes.
Chair Machado,
Aye.
Commissioner Reisinger,
Yes.
and Commissioner Sandoval.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Motion passed.
All right, the next item on our agenda is the Tusconia Marsh Renovation Project.
So thank you very much. I'd like to introduce Elisa Moore. She's with ESA, and Dane is also with ESA, and they've got their whole project team on. They're just not on camera right now, but I'll let them introduce the rest of their team.
Good evening. Thank you for having us here today. We were asked to come by and share an update on the Tiscornia Marsh project, as well as information on the draft EIR, which is currently out for public review. And I believe you've all been provided access to a copy of that document. Dane and I are going to do a brief presentation on the project itself, as well as the CEQA document and findings. And after that is completed, we're available to answer any questions you have. In addition to Dane and myself, and Borganova and Rachel Carnes from ESA are also with us to help answer questions, as well as Barbara Salzman with Marin Audubon Society, who is the project proponent for this project.
Okay.
Elisa, before you begin, I just want to remind the commission, because some of them are new to the commission since the last time this project was in front of them. So just wanted to let everyone know the City Council and the Park and Rec Commission has already approved this project. This is really for your information before they go to the Planning Commission next week, because it obviously impacts and involves parkland and is right next door to obviously our beautiful Pickleweed Park and Borough Community Center. So there's no action tonight, but they did want to, provide you with this presentation and ask for any feedback if you have some.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share a screen now. All right. Thumbs up if you can see this. All right, thank you. Okay, as mentioned, we're here to give an overview of the project and the CEQA document. And I'm going to start off just by briefly noting that we are undertaking the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, EIR process and schedule, and just give you a little bit of a rundown of the players involved in the phase we're at. The CEQA lead agency for this project is the City of San Rafael, and been working with the planning department to complete the EIR process. And as mentioned previously in introductions, the project proponent is Marin Audubon Society. We've prepared an environmental impact report for this project, which is the highest form of CEQA documentation. And prior to completing the draft EIR, which is out now, we initiated the CEQA process by issuing a notice of preparation in January of this year. We had a 30-day scoping period that included a public meeting with the Planning Commission and collection of comments from the general public and agencies that would be interested in and engaged in this project. The scoping meeting was in February. And as mentioned, we published the draft ER that occurred in September of this year. And we issued notification through the state clearinghouse, newspaper, legal notice, the cities and the Marin Audubon Society's project websites, as well as direct noticing of the adjacent parcels, various interested parties, and public agencies. The end of the comment period will be next Monday, the 26th, and in the same evening, we will be presenting the EIR to the Planning Commission and receiving additional project public input as well as the commission's input. That's where we're at now. And then with that, I'm going to turn this over to Dane to talk a little bit more about the project itself.
Thanks, Lisa. I'll try to be pretty expedient, but I do want to set up what the project is so that Lisa can talk then about the EIR findings. My name is Dane Behrens. I'm an engineer with ESA and the project manager on our end of things. So we were hired by Marin Audubon Society. Barbara's on this phone or on the phone call. And I'm also joined by Ann Borganova, who's the project director on our end, and we'll probably both answer questions that may come up about the engineering design. So I really wanted to briefly orient everyone to the site, which I know folks are probably pretty familiar with the area, but there are some nuances here. So when we say Tusconia Marsh, historically what we've meant by that is that if you're looking here at the opening of the canal or San Rafael Creek to San Rafael Bay, what's historically been called Tusconia Marsh is that eastern fringe of marsh along the eastern edge of the walking path that goes around Pickleweed Park. But also it goes basically from the opening of the canal down to the beginning of the Spinnaker neighborhood. But this is all fronting the Pickleweed Park Center and the canal neighborhood. And so originally the project included that eastern marsh. We started this in 2018 with the feasibility phase, and that was funded by the Marin Community Foundation. So we went through some alternatives, came up with the preferred alternative. And then in this phase, which is the 30% design, preliminary design, we advanced the design a little bit further and set up CEQA. And so the project originally just included the eastern portion of the marsh, but then expanded. We've been working really closely with the city throughout this process, actually. And the city owns Pickleweed Park and that sort of pentagonal shaped, the enclosed marsh to the north of the soccer field. So that's all part of the same parcel and owned by the city. So the project actually includes that. And so I think Paul Jensen had written a white paper in 2014 about sea level rise adaptation options, and that parcel was identified as an opportunity. And so essentially the project includes the eastern portion of the marsh, that enclosed portion of the marsh to the west, and then where that land connects to the houses, the first cul-de-sac on Sorrento Way to the west, a little bit further than that. And so I think we can probably go to the next slide and I can give a little bit more context. Oh, okay, there's the project area. Forgot these were animated. So just wanted to point out some of the constraints here. We're looking at, as I said, it's a marsh project. This is specifically marsh restoration and sea level rise adaptation. But in terms of the underlying issues, which we'll talk a little bit on the next slide in a second, this is also it's a flooding issue. And so this is the most vulnerable part of the shoreline defense, essentially the lowest part of the shoreline levee, even going down to Gene and John Starkweather Park. And so this was a real opportunity, working with the city to help shore this up as part of a sea level rise adaptation, specifically for the canal neighborhood, which is especially vulnerable. So let's go to the next slide. So to give some quick historical context, we know that the marsh has been eroding, and that's really what kicked this off. The marsh is important habitat for a few endangered species, but specifically ridgeway rails, which this is the last bit of marsh between China Camp and Corte Madera to the south, where they have habitat. And so it's really important habitat for them. And so this marsh has been eroding due to wind wave action for the last six or seven decades, as far as we know, based on historical image review. And it's actually been quite rapid. So that outer line there shows the 1957 shoreline. We've lost about half the marsh since that time. And on the northern half, especially, it's going at about 3 to 5 feet per year of erosion. So the do nothing alternative of this project is to essentially lose the marsh in about 20 or 30 years or so, which would expose the pathway, the walking path, to much more direct wave action and erosion, and much more higher likelihood of wave overtopping and spilling over during flood events. And so that's the big underlying issue here: habitat loss for ridgeway rails and other species, but also enhanced flood risk without a project. And so that's what we're really trying to address here. So if you can go to the next slide. So I'm going to show this. This is existing conditions again, but I just wanted to show it in this color scheme because I'm going to show with project in this similar color scheme next. But so that that orange outline again is sort of the project area, and it does include the PG&E towers, and again that eastern portion of marsh, the enclosed portion of marsh, and then the area to the west where that city-owned pond is, towards the edge of Sorrento Way. And so a couple things to point out here. I should probably back up a second and say, this is the convergence point of several projects. And so as part of this project, we work with the city in terms of layouts with respect to the soccer field upgrades, the improvement of the Schoen Park area for parking. And also we've got existing water lines that go along the western edge of the site. So we've been working with the city in terms of coordinating that. There's a trash collection project that is hopefully going to be underway at some point in the next few years on that end of things. Those are all things that where we were trying to like coordinate with the city and understand how things could lay out together. And so I think we can actually go to the next slide. This is my last one before handing it over to Elisa. So the project includes several elements. I'm going to go through these pretty slowly, but number one is raising the levee. So starting at the eastern or southeastern corner of that orange box, we would start to raise the levee. And that's actually the lowest point near where Schoen Park used to be. But then raising the levee all the way around the site, and essentially around the soccer field, it would be a new alignment. So right now, the levee is that walking path that goes around that enclosed marsh. Essentially what we would be doing is raising and having a new levee along the northern edge of the soccer field. And that would be merged with the park's plans for improving the soccer field. And so there'd be a raised levee along the back shore of the whole site. And the levee would be improved from a habitat perspective in that it would have a flatter slope on the marsh side, which is better for sea level rise transition habitat area, and also better for habitat. That's what that darker green, those darker green patches are. Those are on the diked marsh side and also the southern portion by Schoen Park. But then also beyond that, we want to restore the marsh that's been lost. So that eastern light green area we would be essentially looking to use beneficially reused dredge material, from sites nearby, from the harbors nearby, place new marsh there again where it used to be, and essentially restore that back to marsh, but front that with a gravel beach to prevent that from eroding in the future. And then having a new sort of channel along where there's an escarpment now where it's been eroding, that would now be a tidal channel that opens on the south side. And then lastly, that diked marsh area to the west, we would essentially, once we've built that new levee alignment along the northern edge of the soccer field, we would be lowering that walking path. And so that would be open to back up to tidal action, which is those two blue channels there that are sort of schematic. And so the light green areas are essentially new marsh. that would be connected to the bay. And then on the western edge, lastly, we would tie off the levee on the western side. It's a little trickier because we have to interface with the project where there's going to be trash capture there. And also there's not really any obvious high points, just part of the challenge of working in a coastal city, but there would be a western tie off to the project. And essentially, I should say that the new levee alignment would be the new walking path. So it would be improved over what's there now, which is sort of an uneven dirt earthen pathway that's kind of lumpy. It would be a much flatter and uniform surface. So hopefully an improvement. But in general, again, this is a habitat improvement project. It's a sea level rise adaptation project. It's a project that will hopefully engage the community in being part of this in their backyard. And it's also a flood risk reduction project for sea level rise. So there's a lot of pieces to this. And again, we're interfacing with the city and have been, and will continue to do so on all these other projects that overlap here. So I'll hand it over with that to Elisa to talk about the EIR.
Thank you, Dane. Okay. So with that, what we did on the ESA team with the city's planning department is took the project description that Dane laid out and including a bit more detail than we shared with you today, you'll find in the EIR, and that included a great deal of detail around how this project would be constructed in terms of the phasing, which step would come first, and quantifying the construction approach around the building of this project, as well as operating, which mostly relates to just some general operations and maintenance activities to ensure that the new marsh takes and is thriving, as well as then maintaining the area over time. As you might guess from a project like this, the majority of the environmental impacts that we would expect to see are going to occur during the construction phase, because this is a fairly large project that will require quite a bit of moving of materials to build up the areas that Dane mentioned, as well as create these new levees and trail areas. In evaluating the environmental impacts, there's a host of topics that we do need to look at. What we did find is that there are no significant unavoidable impacts. So there are no impacts that we couldn't overcome with some mitigation measures. The impacts that we did find would be significant and need mitigation were mostly associated with air quality emissions that would occur during the construction phase that could be controlled by equipment type use and containment of emissions in the types of equipment used mostly. Some biological resources impacts, which are mostly associated with the habitat that exists in this project area, as well as the open water areas. And so there's a number of mitigation measures related to pre-construction surveys and avoidance and other types of measures that would ensure that the species that may be present can be avoided for the most part. And the species of particular concern are the California black rail and ridgeway rail, as well as other nesting birds. Salt marsh harvest mouse and wandering shrew may also be at the site, as well as some special status plant species and fish and marine species that may be affected during some limited pile driving that may be needed to create an offshore barge area for the materials to be brought to the site. In addition, while we don't know of any known cultural resources or tribal cultural resources to be present anywhere in the vicinity of the project, we always are cautious about the potential for accidental discovery of such resources when it comes to the projects with earth moving included. In terms of the project, the environmental topics that we looked at and found to be less than significant, not applicable, or no impact, there's a whole host of them, and those do include aesthetic resources. We evaluated, the current setting as well as the projected setting with these new marsh areas. And then some of the biological resources topics related to wetlands and riparian habitats, given the increase in habitat that would be created by this project. And then topics like greenhouse gas emissions, agriculture resources, and various other topics. We also in the ER look at CEQA alternatives, which is required. And the CEQA alternatives need to, in addition to the engineering alternatives that were evaluated early in the process, we need to look at alternatives that meet most of the project objectives and lessen or avoid an environmental impact that was identified for the project. And those alternatives need to be feasible. We looked at the no project alternative, which is required under CEQA, as well as a couple of reduced project alternatives. As mentioned, the majority, because the environmental impacts we identify all relate to construction, the way we could see if impacts could be avoided or reduced would be, is there a feasible reduced project that would involve less activities, essentially? And we did identify that the environmentally superior alternative would be an alternative that eliminates the dike marsh portion of the project, because that would have the least amount of project construction and reduces the construction related effects. But we do note that that alternative would only partially meet project objectives and provides the least amount of habitat as well as flood benefits, and also would not be as long, it wouldn't provide as much longevity in terms of the protections the project could provide. So that kind of concludes our overview of the contents of the draft EIR. I'll also share that we will be, again, we'll be taking comments for the draft EIR through the next Monday, the 26th at 5 p.m. And any comments that anyone want to make, that folks that are listening tonight or the commission, can be sent to Theo Sanchez, who is with the city of San Rafael. And I'll also note that reminding folks that we'll be expecting to complete. Did I have another slide? I do. Sorry. Next steps in the EIR is that once the draft EIR review period concludes, we'll be working on a response to comments and addressing all the public and agency comments that are received in the next couple of months, and then we'll be distributing those to all commenters prior to a certification and project approval hearing. It was noted at the beginning of this meeting that this project has been approved by your commission in its early planning phases, something that you would like to see move forward. There's a formal project approval process that also needs to happen and cannot happen until an ER certification. So we are expecting to be in front of the Planning Commission in early December for that hearing. And I believe that is the end of the presentation.
Terrific. Thank you, Elisa and Dane, for that very thorough overview. Commissioners, do you have any questions? Yes, Stacy.
I have two questions. One is the beach area, is that going to be accessible by humans or dogs?
That is not the plan. It would essentially be cut off on the southern end. So there would be a tidal channel on the southern end. And on the northern end, it would essentially abut the canal. It's not planned to have public use.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is, after construction, how is it going to be maintained? Like, is that a city responsibility or is that a BCDC, or what's the jurisdictional relationship to maintenance?
It's a good question. Oh, Anne, were you going to go?
Well, I'd say that just generally there'll be a post-construction monitoring and establishment period that will be extension of the implementation project. And then, we anticipate that the marsh and the beach will be relatively like low maintenance, self-maintaining.
Mm-hmm.
And the levee itself, the plan is for the city to be responsible for maintaining the levee. And I guess the trail would be, that's a good question, because I don't know if it's Park and Rec or if it's Public Works, but I assume the trail is part of the city's responsibility, at least the portion that's on your property.
Right.
And if I could just say, we usually we always take care of the marshes that we own. The marshes usually don't require much of any care because nature does a good job with marshes, but the transition zone will be having to watch out for, because the upland plants don't, they need a little more attention. They, you know, if it's dry, they'll need some watering and whatever. But we are going to have straw that did some work there before. We're planning to have them vegetate with the kids from Bahia Vista School again, the sides of the levee.
And may I ask one more question? And that's
Go for it.
that, you know, the marsh habitat restorations in Novato and Hamilton has some nice informational signage. Is that also part of the installation plan?
We haven't done the detailed, like public, that part of the design, but I think we would definitely want to have some interpretive signs.
Sure.
Thank you.
I've got one question, and that is, what's the estimated time of this project would take from starting the construction to the end?
Well, since I'm unmuted, I'll keep talking. It is a relatively stretched out construction period. So the construction is gonna happen periodically over probably 3 years. And that's because we are limited on when we can do certain work because of the wildlife protection windows. So most of the work is gonna happen late summer and in the fall. And we anticipate in the first year, we build the beach. And in the second year, we would receive the dredge material and have the dredge material placed. And we'll either be building the levee the levee construction could happen either of those years, but we'll need probably a third year for the material to dry and consolidate. And then we would do the final cutting the channel through the marsh and reconnecting both the diked marsh and the newly created marsh back to the tidal waters.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from the commissioners? No more. Okay, well, thank you so much. That was terrific. It seems kind of an exciting project, you know. We're doing a lot of things to help the environment and also that whole the neighborhood down there. So that's really great. Thank you.
Thank you for having us here tonight.
All righty.
We appreciate the time. Have a
Got
good
it.
day.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next step, public comment from the audience regarding any items not listed on the agenda. Becky, is there anybody in the audience?
No, we don't have anyone in the audience.
Okay. So do you still do the, I guess you wouldn't need to tell anybody anything if they're not there, right? So, okay. We'll go to the next item on the agenda, and that is the 2021 annual child care report.
I'd like to introduce Kelly Albrecht. She is our senior recreation supervisor, and she oversees the child care division, which includes 2 licensed preschools as well as 6 licensed school age programs, and also oversees the youth enrichment programs.
Hi, Kelly.
Nice to see, I know some of you already, but nice to see everyone. And all right, here I go. It's my first time sharing a screen, so hopefully I'll get it right on the first time.
All right.
Okay. One sec, sorry, it's on the, okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yay, I did it. Okay, here we go. This is the 2021 annual child care report. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about childcare programming. It started back in 1963. The first preschool program was located in this building, Serenfell Community Center, and then later ended up at Short School campus. And then from 1974 to 2001, the Short School location provided both preschool and school age programming, and we served about 150 children daily. And then in the late 1990s, the city expanded their services in Serenfell in the preschool district, and they purchased modular portables at most of the sites and expanded the growing program even more.
And then in 1998, Pickleweed Children's Center expanded their preschool program to include a half-day program for children 3 to 5 years old. And that program is funded by California Department of Ed, First Five of California, and we have a small grant for the CDBG from the County of Marin. And then in 2000, Parkside Children's Center, we were lucky that the city built beautiful Parkside Children's Center in Albert Park. And that is the preschool and school age program that was formerly at Short School. And that's where my office is, which is great. Okay, now current childcare programming. So we have 6 school age sites at the elementary school campuses with the exception of Parkside. And then 2 preschool programs. In our school age program, this year we're serving 355 children. And we provide preschool programming. We have 58 children at the Pickleweed Preschool and 30 children at Parkside. And we have 25 permanent, part-time, and full-time staff and 13 temp seasonal. And this is a picture of one of our CPR training days that we had CPR in the morning and then training in the afternoon. So that's a couple years old, but that's our staff. And then fiscal year 2021 impacts. Obviously the pandemic, as you all know. Enrollment was impacted due to state and county health and safety guidelines. The classroom portable restrictions were really small. We were still at about 14 for the entire school year, with the exception of my Lucas Valley site and Vallecito Children's Center. We're able to house use an additional classroom on campus. So we were able to serve about 28 children at those facilities. But it was a big reduction in enrollment for the 2021 fiscal year, which shows in our revenue and expense budget for the 2021 fiscal year. Obviously, on the left-hand side, you can see it's the revenue appropriation, what we're appropriated for the year and what we're supposed to be bringing in, and then the expenses down below. So for this fiscal year, our overall revenue, for 2021, revenue in, we brought in $2,235,000, and our expense was $3,054,000. We're lucky that we have a fund balance that was able to provide support to the child care division, and the difference was $819,400 that we used from our fund balance, which was approximately a little bit over $1 million that we had a fund balance. So we were lucky to have that to help support the child care program during the COVID pandemic. And then for this fiscal year, we're very happy to hear that capacity restrictions were lifted. Obviously, prevention strategies are still in place with masking, social distancing when eating, still masking outside at my preschools currently right now. We're able to take them off right now on the elementary school campuses outside, but still inside we're masking. So our capacity in our school age program, we're about 80%. You can see the graph to the right where I have licensed capacity and then current capacity for this school year. Parkside Preschool, we're about 60% of capacity. And at Pickleweed Preschool, we're about 85% of capacity. And some of the limitations in our school age program, why we're short only at 80%, is staffing. We're recruiting, we're looking for staff, and additional space on the elementary school campuses is very limited. Okay. And then this is just my little conclusion. Childcare programming, as you guys know, it's vital and to the sustainability and economic vitality to the community. Our division is designed to be fully recover costs. Obviously, there's some years where recession hits or pandemic, and we have trouble kind of keeping up with the cost of the program. And we continue to struggle in filling vacant positions. I'm sure you guys hear that a lot. Every childcare program in the county is hiring at this moment. So it's very challenging to kind of take the full capacity because we're short, because we're short some teachers at pretty much both the preschools and about 4 of my school age programs currently right now. And then I just kind of want to end on a note. My childcare staff right now, I have about, I would say 22 to 25 of us have been with the city anywhere between 10 and 30 years. I think actually Trish is up to 38 years, my site director at Vallecito. And they're an amazing team to work with. And if you guys ever want to drop in, I know some of you have already attended our program or still attending our programs, but feel free to drop in anytime, or happy to give you guys a tour of our programs. But they're really committed and they run the best program. So. And that's it. So if you have any questions, okay, wait, I'm supposed to stop sharing. There we go.
Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate it. Commissioners, are there any questions for Kelly? Okay, Kat.
I just have more of a comment from being familiar with the child care programs in San Rafael, and they're absolutely wonderful. They're one of the stakeholding programs of San Rafael, Recreation Community Services, and Kelly and her team. From my personal experience, but also hearing from family and friends in different schools. I mean, it's always sold out. It's always great. I mean, the programs are amazing. And as a parent myself as well, anything we can do to support childcare, affordable childcare, and quality within Marin, anything we can do. So, thank you. I know it's not been easy. I see the ads all the time out for new people to work, and it's just a revolving door. So please know that reputation is still proceeding, and it's a high quality program that there's always a wait list, at least from what I've heard. So.
Thank you, Kat. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kat. Hey, Stacy, you had a question?
I was just gonna have a comment to say thank you, Kelly, to you and your team. I know this has been a really challenging year and a half, so we appreciate so much your grit and determination to keep it running and serve the families of San Rafael. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Kelly, what's the biggest issue in regards to hiring staff? Are we competitive in regards to compensation, or is it just there's just not enough folks out there that can do the work, or what?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I mean, they're seeing a trend in early childhood education field where people are not going into the field. As you can see the article today in the IJ about they're struggling to find credentialed teachers and substitutes working in the schools. ECE obviously pays a lot less. We're competitive in the market in regards to our total package with the benefits and retirement. Our hourly is getting there. We're a little bit behind the market, but our total package is better than most agencies. So it's hard to live in Marin and work and have the salary of a childcare employee.
Right.
So that's always a struggle, but yeah, I mean, even in the school age programs, I'm finding that a lot of college kids, we're trying to recruit at College Marin, or even the seniors at San Rafael High, a lot of them just don't work or don't want to work, or I don't know. It's just, it's shocking at times sometimes. I mean, I've worked since I was 15, and that's just, that's just what we did. But yeah, a lot of young kids aren't working like they did. So kind of trying to get them, we're trying to get back into connecting with the local colleges, which we do all the time, just finding quality people to come in and work.
Well, the program must be great, just since you have such a longevity amongst your key staffers, right? So
yeah,
so
and that's
awesome.
My site directors, the whole team, all of us, I think it's 12 of us, we're all over 15 years, which is just, it's great, because I think that's why parents keep, the reputation, and you don't see that much in childcare. So
got it.
Thank you for all your support.
Yeah. Any other questions from the commissioners? Comments? No? So thank you very much, Kelly.
All right, thanks.
Much appreciated.
I get to go home.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Becky, has anybody else showed up?
No, we do not have anyone in the audience.
All right. So the next item on the agenda is the review proposed park use policy.
That would be me.
All right.
All right. Let's get this thing going. Let's see. Let me move you guys over to my side so I can see. All right. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
Oh, good. The last time I shared my screen on my desktop, it did not work, if you remember. So I don't trust it very well, but we did a trial run, Kelly and I, so we made sure everything worked fine. So Catherine worked really hard on this before she went off on maternity leave, but you know, I am not that type of boss that demands that she should come back a month after her baby's born to give this presentation. So I'm going to give you my best effort here, but I will be glad to answer any questions that you have as we go through it. Before we kick this off, I just want to remind the commission that this is one of the last policies and procedures that you're approving for now, that I can think of. You've already considered the fill rental policy and approved that, the facility rentals policy and approved that, and the ongoing facility rentals. So this really is the park use policy, which covers picnic areas as well as park areas. So currently, what's a little different than the last out of the three that we just mentioned, one of them, the ongoing rentals, we did not have a policy nor a process for. Well, we actually don't have a policy or process for our picnic rentals. And we have never rented out park space that wasn't a field, athletic facility, or picnic area. So this policy is establishing some criteria and the process that people should be applying for either the use of picnic areas or park areas. So it clearly spells everything out of when things are due, et cetera. So it's really just to make sure it sets forth all the conditions and processes for the rentals of parks as well as the picnic areas. So people can clearly find that information on our website or if they're visiting it in our community centers. Currently, the city has 28 parks. Of those 28 parks, it actually has 6 picnic areas that it rents. There's several at Bristol Park, Pickleweed Community Park, Santa Margarita, Sun Valley, Terra Linda Community Park, and Victor Jones are the 6. But it's interesting to know, as I just mentioned, the city has never reserved park space that wasn't a picnic area or a field. But during COVID, we got really creative. I think you remember this. Staff created the opportunity for recreation-based providers, local, like San Rafael-based, to bring their businesses outdoors because they were unable to offer their services inside like fitness facilities, volleyball programs, things like that. They no longer could operate indoors. So we put something together real quickly and we came up with 3 spots in the city: Albert Park, the turf area that sits behind the playground. It's kind of that turf area between bocce, the playground, and the Parkside Children's area. The Victor Jones Park down on the lower level. And then the wedding lawn at Falkirk ended up being a yoga lawn and a Tai Chi lawn and everything else you can imagine. It was actually really wonderful. So after COVID, we kind of figured out, hey, you know what? This worked. Why don't we do it? So this table that you're looking at outlines all the parks that, with their amenities, that we rent spaces at. The areas that are highlighted in red are the new areas that we're going to rent out going forward. So you will see that we're adding a picnic area to our list. So we will no longer have 6 parks, we'll have 7. Freitas has a picnic area. Don't ask me why we never rented it out. It's sitting right there, but we will be. And we will also be renting out the grass area at Albert Park, as well as Terra Linda Park and the basketball court. So permitted uses for the picnic sites. So as we mentioned, the 7 sites now will include Freitas. And these are just a couple of pictures. One is the top one that you probably recognize, that's Sun Valley. Some of you know that really well. And the one down below is the Redwood Grove at Bristol Park. So permitted park sites and uses. This is a little different. This is kind of what we did during COVID. So we've identified 4 locations that are mainly community parks. The reason for that, the type of activities that we are opening ourselves to rent out for are special events and commercial activities. And so the appropriate place to do that is community parks, not a neighborhood park that really obviously can't support the off-street parking or something like that. There is an exception in here though, you'll see this. Albert Park obviously has parking. Bristol Park is one of the few kind of quasi neighborhood parks. It's large enough actually to be considered a community park. And it actually has elements in there that in other cities we consider a community park. It has tennis courts and active playing spaces, and usually a neighborhood park does not have that, but we have a lot of exceptions to that. But Bristol Park has been the home of Porch Fest and many of the Bristol Park Neighborhood Association events. So for us to come out and say we're not going to allow special events, we'd be contradicting how many decades of use. So we're not going to do that. The other two
Susan?
sides, yes.
What's the difference between a neighborhood park and a community park?
That's a really good question. When we start going through the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, that they're going to help identify the different park classifications that the city has. So in theory, what it should be is a neighborhood park should be about 3 to 5 acres. And it should serve the neighborhood it's adjacent to. And the type of amenities in a neighborhood park are things that are passive. So you'll normally find picnic benches, you'll find playgrounds for 2 to 5 and 5 to 12-year-olds, things like that. You know, maybe a little meandering trail walking through there or something like that. But you're not going to find active playing spaces like basketball courts, tennis courts, aquatics facilities, things of that nature. You also normally won't find off-street parking nor restrooms. Now, I say that because that's a true neighborhood park classification definition. How many parks do we have contradict that, right? So we've got Bristol Park that is a much larger neighborhood park, and it's got a restroom and it's got a tennis court. We've got Bret Hart that just put a restroom in it, and it's not even, I don't even think it even is a half an acre, unless you count the hillside. So we have contradictions throughout the city. In newer cities, it's much more obvious. A community park is usually 15 to 20, sometimes a little bit larger park, and it supports the entire community. So those are the parks, and we have good examples of those. Albert Park, Pickleweed, Terra Linda. They have off-street parking, meaning they have parking lots. They have park restrooms or restrooms that are adjacent, and they have many active playing spaces. They have community centers, gymnasiums, aquatics facilities, tennis courts, ball fields, lighted facilities. So that's probably just kind of the thumbnail sketch of the difference between the two. And then you have regional parks, which are usually offered by counties. But every once in a while, you'll have, like we do here, we have a lot of the county facilities that sit in San Rafael. So we have the benefit of having both neighborhood, community, and even regional parks in our area. Sometimes you even have a state one.
Thank you.
I believe you do. Special events. So the two areas that we're bringing into these turf areas, if you're asking, is the difference between this is the picnic areas. We're really focusing on those being private events, private, you know, family barbecues, church barbecues, neighborhood association, things like that. When we talk about special events or commercial recreation activities, we're really looking at something that is much larger. So for special events, how does the city define that? It's open to the public. Is there a admission charge? Do they expect over 100 people? And then what we would allow to be in the parks is something that would be traditional or heritage value, something that is aligned with the community or San Rafael. We're not looking to have, I'm trying to think of something that wouldn't relate to us, but let's say we wouldn't be looking towards turning this into, I don't know, a car show, maybe. Some cities do, but what we would probably be looking at are things that you've seen, like Porch Fest, Art and Wine Fest, maybe a summer job fair or a summer camp fair, those type of special events. Commercial recreation activities, what we're talking about here is offering classes and programs, which is what we did during COVID. So going back to the picnic rentals process and requirements, the policy establishes a reservation and refund time frame for picnic rentals. It allows people to reserve them 6 months in advance, but they have to pay when they apply for that reservation. Our old policy was that they didn't have to pay till 10 days before. I'm just letting you know that's really difficult if somebody hasn't paid to try to make sure that you've received all the fees that you need to by the time that they show up. So we're changing that and saying that it is the fees are due on the date of booking. And again, they can do that up to 6 months in advance. If there's room, they can do it 2 weeks in advance, but that's how far out they can. No insurance is still needed for private rentals. Insurance is always needed, and you'll see that for other things. And then, as we mentioned, groups can apply after the application window closes. So park rentals for special events, it also establishes the reservation refund timeframe. There is one other element besides reserving the park. Not only are there fees due, but there's security deposits, there's security personnel that are normally needed, insurance requirements, meaning liability insurance. And then they also need a special event permit, which is coordinated through PD. So there's kind of two parts. So just because they have rented the facility and said, okay, we want to have the special event, we will also work with PD to make sure that they have applied and checked all the boxes of the permit application process through PD, because PD is going to ask for things like, you know, what's your traffic plan, what's your parking plan, what's your road closure, which is all part of the same thing. Do you have enough restrooms to support? Do you have wash stations to support? What's your security plan? Things like that. We're just handling the park part of it. The commercial activities are offering programs, classes in our parks. The city currently has one pathway that we allow it. So if you want to teach it for the city of San Rafael and become a contract instructor, you apply as a contract instructor, and it requires that you have a business permit. It requires that you have liability insurance, workers' comp if you have employees. And then the compensation, how that is handled is it's a revenue split with the city. So the other thing that we do for any of our contractors is we advertise in our activities guide. So we handle taking all the money in registration for them. We advertise for them, but as part of that, there's a revenue split. We retain some of it to cover our costs for renting the facility or park site. And we cover our administrative costs of taking in registration and advertising for them. The second path that we're creating is what we did during COVID. If somebody doesn't want to be a contract instructor, not a problem. You can come and rent our park, but there's a time frame. And in the staff report and also in the attachment, you'll see that there is a timeline of when we'll accept park rentals for those specific park areas. It doesn't change too much. They'll still have to pay the fees for the park. They'll still have to provide liability insurance, and they'll still have to have a business license, but they get to take all their own registration and they get to keep all their own money, and we do not advertise for them. So it's just slightly different. But we did look in some cities and they do it. Santa Cruz has probably been doing it the longest successfully. And so we're going to offer it because it is it's highly desired, and it's another way of bringing in local businesses that offer recreational activities. We're not looking to offer programs in our parks that are not conducive or not in line with what the parks are intended for. And that's it. I don't know
Thank
if
you,
anybody
Susan.
has any questions.
Questions from the commissioners, please. Kat.
Thank you for the presentation. Just curious, what kind of, will this increase the ability for staff to be able to enforce any vandalism issues or hurting the park? You know, I remember multiple times the, you know, glass in the pool at Terra Linda, for example, or you come to a park is totally trashed. And I know I've talked to staff before that there's just not really much they could do in the past because they didn't know who was there or kind of what that was going on. And just I've heard in, you know, the CPRS chatter and experienced it myself that there's, you know, with the homeless around in parks as well, it's becoming more difficult for the community member who has paid for the park to actually use the facilities. I'm just wondering if this gives additional leverage for potential police support or along those lines.
It does and it doesn't. I mean, there still is drop-in use that you can't prevent, and a lot of that drop-in use is, you know, obviously they're coming in, they're using the facility and leaving their trash behind or whatever, and you'll never get that. We're still not requiring insurance for our private rentals, and that was, we looked into the possibility of doing that to recoup in case somebody leaves the facility in disarray, but we're not doing that. Not for the private rentals. There will be deposits for the bigger special events as well as for any user that uses the park for commercial recreation activities. But I will say that a couple of things. Number one, the municipal code requires anyone that has a organized group of 25 or more or is brought together for a single purpose must have a permit. So that's already in the Muni code, and it's in most cities' Muni code. So the police can enforce that already. It's just a challenge, to be quite frank. It's, there's not enough enforcement in any city to bust every off-leash dog, a child on a skateboard where they shouldn't be, or someone using a park that shouldn't be. Actually, in Sun Valley recently, we had a young man who was offering a fitness program, fitness classes. And we had sent staff out there on multiple occasions and brought code enforcement and received a letter, notified them, that they will receive a fine, etc. Finally stopped, but it went on for months. And we had the neighbors helping us. I mean, they literally would call us, hey, he just pulled up, here's his car. So, but I know you experienced that as well in Walnut Creek, and you experienced it in your prior city as well. It's a little bit more difficult. I think by offering other commercial activities into our larger parks, and by opening them up so they can be well used, the more they're used, the less likely unwanted behavior exists. So we're hopeful on this, but we do have a good relationship with PD, and they do come. But you're right. We don't have a park ranger system, so we don't have people standing out there watching people use the parks. So.
No, I was hoping that, that's a great answer, great feedback. And I was hoping that you guys had somehow, cracked the magical code to figure out how to help protect it, because it's definitely an issue. And as a resident myself, it's, I was at Bristol Park the other day and it was just not pretty, unfortunately.
Yeah,
So
I think one of the things we're going to find out from the Parks and Recreation Master Plan is they're going to go around and they're going to assess our parks for amenities as well as condition. And they're going to make recommendations based on the staffing model that we have in Public Works. That is it substantial? Is it what we need? And I think you're going to find that there's going to be a recommendation there that it needs to be a little bit more robust. San Rafael, definitely you get your return on investment in our budget. We're extremely lean, and that's not just our department, it's everywhere. But there are cities that have a park ranger system, and there are cities that offer a park attendant, just like a facility attendant. So when you rent a park, they meet you out there, they sign you in, they make sure that the picnic area is all clean, and then they come back and they check you out, and they often have a deposit. So I highly recommend that. That's something we're working towards. But again, that would affect the fees as well. So.
Right.
Any other questions?
I think you're good, Susan.
Oh my gosh, will you guys give me a report card back to Catherine if she's not worried?
Yeah.
Yes, Stacy.
Oh, I just was curious about the fees. So there's no fee changes at this moment. Okay.
You
fee reductions for like nonprofits and schools and things like that.
Yeah, the fees were adopted by the city council on July 6th. You guys had a little bit of a preview of that, and we did change them. Great question, Stacy.
Oh, I do remember now. Okay, yeah.
So we did a couple things. So we classified our picnic areas by size. We didn't have that before. We had like 2 sizes, but we changed the fees according to size. And we also had a sliding scale depending on if you're a nonprofit, private, commercial use. So just like
it's still the best deal in town. I'm looking at the pricing right here. So
all coming back to me a little bit now.
We're good. Anything else, you guys?
No, unless there's any additional feedback, we would love for you. I know it's an option, but we would love for you to approve it if you feel comfortable doing so.
Can I get a motion that we review?
I'll move to approve.
Okay. Second.
Becky,
do you want to call the roll, please?
Right, Commissioner, let's see here, get my current list. Gutierrez,
Yes.
Commissioner Wellman,
Yes.
Chair Machado,
Aye.
Commissioner Reisinger,
Aye.
and Commissioner Sandoval.
Yes.
All right, motion passed.
And we didn't have any participants. I'm looking at the participants, so.
Yeah, okay. Well, good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there any other reports of meetings, conferences, seminars attended by any of the commissioners? Yes, Ariel.
I attended the pickleweed committee meeting on the 6th, I think, a couple weeks ago. They went over some applications that they're approving for using the community center, and reviewed proposed changes to the guidelines, the application process. They were switching the process to be a biannual application process and splitting up the allotment for the year differently than they had before. I think, oh, they also were, Susan was there. They were also selecting a committee member to serve on the master plan, Parks master plan project, just like we have. I think it's Robert. Are you doing that? No, is it Kayla? On our committee. So they were choosing someone to participate in that process as well, and talked a little bit about their plans for Dia De Los Muertos. I think that's kind of about what was discussed.
It was a long meeting.
They're going to be busy right about now, right? Preparing for November 1st.
Yeah, they're really excited. They're bringing a lot of it back to in person. So yeah.
Thank you, Ariel.
Mhm.
Anybody else? Susan, do you have a schedule of upcoming meetings and events for us?
Yeah, I believe it's attached to your packet. Just want to mention, since we are obviously going into November, that we've got several days where there are legal holidays, so city offices will be closed. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with that. So November 11th, as well as the 25th and 26th, will be closed. But also, just to let you know, we've got a couple things coming up for our next meeting. We're dark in December, so next meeting is the last meeting for the year. We will have the election of the chair and vice chair. We'll be setting your schedule. We have a presentation in regards to aquatics, and I believe the orchids are also going to be attending. And then we have the garden guidelines, fingers crossed. It's only taken us a year to get that one. If I can do that, you know what, I should retire. But hopefully we'll bring
You
that
are.
forward to you guys in November, and that will be it. So it's going to be a busy November meeting. It's November 18th.
So in regards to the choosing the chair and the vice chair, is it the city's wish that the vice chair will step up into the chair position and then we'll put somebody else into the vice chair position? Is that how it works?
There's nothing written in stone, but it's pretty much historical that, you know, usually you kind of move up. So the vice chair becomes the chair and the chair
Okay.
becomes the past chair. When you have a new board or commission like we do on the library side of the house, where I think the most tenured person has been on it for 2 years, it gets a little bit more challenging. You're really getting a lot of new people who are stepping up into that role right away. But that is the typical thing.
Okay.
To give everybody an opportunity. You know, there's 2 4-year terms, and that way everybody gets an opportunity to serve if they'd like to.
All right. So the commissioner should be thinking about that for next month.
Absolutely. And the Day of the Dead actually has 2 events. One is this Saturday. It's well, we'll see with the rain, right? But it's a car procession, can't talk now, down 4th Street during I want to say 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And there's some altars downtown. I believe there's 12, I think, if I remember correctly. And then 2 weeks later, it's actually at the Borough Community Center.
All right.
Yeah,
Anything
it's
else?
3 o'clock Saturday, and it looks like it might not be pouring rain, so I'm assuming they'll do it. But
Great.
and soccer's off for the day, so everyone should be free.
It's great. It's great. So that's it. That's all I've got. And as you all know, Catherine had her baby on
Yeah.
September 21st. So little Evie is exactly 1 month old today. So yeah, I haven't seen her in person yet. So we are going to get to see a first glimpse of her, I think, next week or so.
All right.
Right?
Anything else for the greater good here, commissioners? Nada? Okay, so I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 7:07. So thank you very much for you all being here. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.
Guys, take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good night, everybody.